Hey guys, welcome back. A few days after the Halo Infinite reveal, Chris Lee revealed a detail about the game that is literally every lore fan's equivalent of being told you've won the lottery. Halo Infinite will indeed be set on Zeta Halo. Now, on its own, this is frankly game-changing news. Zeta Halo / Installation 07 is one of the most interesting locations in the entire Halo universe, period. It's steeped in eons of deep, dark, and disturbing history that's bound to enthrall any type of Halo fan. But when you consider that Halo Infinite is an open-world game that actively encourages you to explore the ring, my oh my, the potential is, I'm gonna say it, quite literally infinite. So, to get you prepped to explore this insanely exciting foreigner location, we're gonna cover the entire comprehensive history of it, from as far back as before 98,445 BC, during the terrifying era of the Foreigner Flood War, to as recent as 2555, and of course, Halo Infinite in 2560. Buckle up, it's gonna be a bloody disturbing ride. So, we're gonna start right at the top, and from the beginning, it should be very clear to you that Zeta Halo is unlike any other Halo the Master Chief has ever and will ever set foot on. In 106,445 BC, yes, we're going that far back, following their victory over ancient humanity and their initial defeat of the Flood, the ancient foreigners constructed the Greater Ark, which was a significantly larger version of Halo 3 and Halo Wars 2's Lesser Ark, which would have two purposes. Number 1, to construct an array of 12 Halo installations, each 30,000 kilometers in diameter, nicknamed the Senescent Array, as a last line of defense should the Flood ever return. And 2, as per the librarian's wishes, it would provide safe indexing of species from across the galaxy to repopulate the galaxy should the array ever be activated. These rings, however, were deeply controversial among the foreigners, so much so that the Prometheans, who were led by the Didact, Halo 4's Didact, of whom were in strong opposition to their construction, were literally exiled or executed following their construction, which was spearheaded by a guy called Faber, who held the title of Master Builder and led an extreme faction within the Builder Rate. Faber the Master Builder. That's a name you're gonna want to remember. Following years of testing and iteration, it was decided, however, that these larger Halos were far too inefficient and unstable, and that the Greater Ark was flawed in far too many ways to make it a viable foundry long term. And so, after quite a bit of convincing, in 98,445 BC, Faber agreed to construct another Ark, the Lesser Ark, and 6 new Halo installations: Installation 01, Installation 02, Installation 03, Installation 04, Installation 05, and Installation 06, named numerically in order of their construction. Their alphabetic names, Alpha Halo, Delta Halo, Zeta Halo, etc., indicate the order in which they were fired, but more on that later. The Lesser Ark and this new array of Halos, which was nicknamed the Neoteric Array, were vastly smaller in scale, each only 10,000 kilometers in diameter rather than their predecessors' 30,000 kilometers, yet were vastly more powerful. They were spread across the galaxy, light years apart from one another, but positioned such that if one Halo were to be fired, its pulse would create a chain reaction, activating all of the other Halos and wiping out all sentient life in the galaxy, starving the Flood of their food. However, Faber kept the creation and location of this array a secret from the rest of the Ecumene, the beginning of its descent into power-driven madness. But by now, I'm sure you've noticed something off. Maybe I've made a mistake. Only 6 Halos were created, I said, but the Neoteric Array, as we can see in Halo 2, consists of 7 Halo rings, right? And Installation 07, the one that I didn't mention, is Zeta Halo. Well, as I said, Zeta Halo's genesis is very, very unique. Zeta Halo was in fact not constructed at the Lesser Ark, It was originally one of the 12 halos in the senescent array that was constructed at the Greater Arc, that was shrunk down to Neoteric size very late in the war, making it the only remaining installation in existence to be constructed at the Greater Arc. We'll touch on the context of its shrinking later on in the video. When it was created, Zeta Halo was chosen as one of the primary housing locations of prehistoric humans by the Lifeworkers, who later built societies and villages and even primitive cities on the ring. However, their fate would be one darker than even their predecessors, which is why these markings from the Infinite Reveal trailer are so exciting. You'll realise why in a minute. 10,000 years following the Flood's mysterious disappearance following their defeat of humanity, the Forerunners' worst nightmares would be realised. In 97,745 BC, on the distant colony world of Seaward, the Flood would stage their grand return, consuming the entire planet and its more primitive inhabitants at a horrifying speed. Word was quickly sent throughout the Ecumene to the Didact, informing him of the Flood's return, and events that would set in motion the end of all life would begin. Faber, the mastermind behind the Halos, placed Installation 07 along with the other 11 original Halos in control of the Contender-class AI Mendicant Bias, that at the time was responsible for organising all of the Forerunner defences against the Flood to fire the Halos if worst came to worst. To allow it to control all of the Halo rings at once, extensions of its main AI housing were placed on all of the rings, and as far as we know, Mendicant's Zeta Halo housing still exists somewhere on the ring. Just a little bit of food for thought there, going into Infinite. However, Faber's power, combined with the relentless spread of the parasite throughout colony worlds, began to twist his mind. He ordered sickening experiments be conducted on the humans native to Installation 07, essentially torturing them, extracting their ancestral personality imprints, which basically were their souls and the souls of their ancestors. It's complicated. It's basically the souls of their ancestors implanted within them that they could hear, that are also referred to as their Gaesh, in a bet to try and find a cure for the Flood. The reason he chose humans for these experiments was because, based upon not just rumours but also his own observations, the Flood didn't seem to infect them. However, there was no biological merit to this whatsoever. In reality, the Flood cared little about infecting humans and cared a lot about infecting Forerunners. See, the Flood were actually created from the corrupted remnants of the Precursors, a godlike species that created all life in the Halo universe, of whom the Forerunners had violently turned on and massacred some 10 million years prior. Those who survived fled the galaxy and broke themselves down into a dust to try and stave off aging, but this dust later corrupted and created the Flood. So, this sick malformation of the once mighty Precursors had somewhat of a personal vendetta against the Forerunners. But anyways, back to Installation 07. Faber's experiments were hitting dead ends, and so, in yet another brazen violation of the deal that he once struck with a librarian to offer safe housing to the species that she was conserving from the Halos, Faber ordered his personal contingent of warrior servants to gather humans from the librarian's special population on Earth, and bring them to Zeta Halo for testing. These tests, these experiments, took place in a number of Flood research facilities spread across the ring, but the native and primitive humans on the Halo had another name for the location of these sickening tests: the Palace of Pain. Now, prior to Halo Infinite, it's worth just noting that in their rather primitive minds, the humans assumed that the Palace of Pain was just one facility. They assumed they were only being taken to one facility, but the Palace of Pain is in fact a number of Flood research facilities scattered across the ring. It was just a name that they gave these facilities. That said, that spire that's been kind of prominent so far in Infinite in the background could very well be one of the many Palaces of Pain on the ring, but only time will tell. Those lucky few who return from the palace, however, were never right again. Some grew other skins, other eyes, and other arms. They broke apart and joined together, then made others sick. They wailed in pain and tried to touch others. They died or had to be killed. As these experiments continued, Faber would move Installation 07 across the galaxy, constantly jumping from location to location to remain undetectable by the Ecumene, and at one point, he ordered Mendicant Bias to conduct a test firing of the Halo in the Charum Hakor star system, once home to the highly advanced ancient humans that the Foreigners defeated. However, in doing so, they would accidentally free an ancient evil, one that would change the course of galactic history in the worst ways imaginable. The war the Foreigners won against ancient humanity was actually a war sparked by a grave misunderstanding. It looked to them as if the ancient humans were just invading their own space, but the reality was far, far different. They weren't invading, they were running from the Flood as they rapidly consumed their colonies. Humanity tried and failed miserably to fight back against the parasite, going as far as literally sacrificing a third of their entire population so the other 2/3 could try and escape. And in doing so, they had imprisoned a being of sorts in a stasis capsule on one of their homeworlds, the Primordial. Now, it's unknown exactly what this Primordial was. Some believed it to be the last precursor, others the first ever Gravemind, but the most likely answer is that it was something of a blend of the two, part precursor and part Gravemind. And when Installation 07, Zeta Halo, was test fired, the time lock that held the Primordial imprisoned was broken. It was quickly brought to Zeta Halo by Faber's warrior servants, and he ordered Mendicant Bias to interrogate this captive, as the Foreigners called it, to try and seek the answer to the Flood invasion. But to say that this backfired is the understatement of the last 100 millennia. See, the Primordial held the wisdom of all the precursors, the species who quite literally created, well, everything. It was literally the most intelligent being to ever exist, and that probably ever will exist. Mendicant Bias was absurdly intelligent too, don't get me wrong, but the Primordial held billion-year-old knowledge of things that Mendicant couldn't even conceive, and it used it to its advantage. Over the course of this 43-year-long interrogation on Zeta Halo, the captive explained to Mendicant the true nature of the Flood, their origin as precursors, and managed to use its knowledge to convince it that the Foreigners were denying their next step in evolution. The Flood, the unifying force. It stated that the Foreigners were damning the galaxy to eternal stagnation by clinging to the rules of the Mantle of Responsibility, and that the only route to progress was through restarting the galaxy and handing ownership of it over to another species. To be specific, humanity. As Mendicant searched throughout the domain to confirm what the captive was saying, what it discovered was, frankly, horrifying. Everything it was saying was correct. Everything the Primordial was saying was fact as far as their records could confirm, and so, believing it to actually be the final precursor, Mendicant Bias bent the knee and was infected with what's referred to as the Logic Plague by the Primordial, officially turning its back on its creators and joining the side of the Flood. But it did more than just that, believing now that they were indeed halting universal progress and were rejecting the next step in their evolutionary path. Deep within Zeta Halo, this vastly powerful AI developed a deep hatred for and a will to destroy the Foreigners. Using its newfound wisdom, it manipulated Faber into going along with its plans, and subsequently, all operations on Zeta Halo were under the command of the Primordial. It had Faber continue his experiments on the humans, for no reason besides the sick and twisted pleasure that it got from seeing them suffer. These experiments went on for so long that societies on the Halo began to collapse. Humans fled their cities and villages for the jungles and forests to hide from the Foreigners, as more were taken to the palace and fewer returned. Sometime later, Mendicant intentionally caused containment breaches in several of the Halo's flood research facilities, which began their spread across the ring. Entire biomes were rapidly consumed, creating installation-wide blightlands and replacing the once quaint environments with sickly flood biomass. So many foreigners on the ring were being consumed that Faber resorted to using the Composer, a foreigner device that, ironically, utilized the precursor idea of neural physics to extract one's essence and create a digital form of it, immune to flood infection. This is a bit off topic, but that's how the robotic Prometheans that we fight in Halo 4 and Halo 5 were created. They are essentially metal bodies controlled by essences of ancient humans and ancient foreigners that were composed, designed purely to counter the flood. And Faber used it on the infected foreigners to at least try and salvage their essence, if nothing else. A small semblance of respect for those who suffered a fate worse than death, and by his hand. Okay, so while that horrific and just awful thought mulls around in your head, allow me to introduce the very fitting sponsors of today's video, Audible. Now, I'm gonna cut to the chase here, right? Almost every bit of lore about Zeta Halo in this video that, hopefully, you're loving, is from the Forerunner trilogy, Cryptum, Primordium, and Silentium, the audiobooks of which are all on Audible, and you can start listening to any of them today by going to audible.com/HiddenXperia, or by texting HiddenXperia to 500 to start your 30-day free Audible trial, as well as getting one audiobook and infinite Audible original monthly downloads absolutely free. You can get Cryptum, the first book in the trilogy, for absolutely nothing, and listen to it on a phone, on a tablet, or on an Amazon Echo device, wherever you are, no matter what you're doing. I personally use Audible to re-listen to the entire trilogy quite regularly, and honestly, it's fantastic. I mean, Primordium is even narrated by Tim Dadabo, the voice of 343 Guilty Spark, and also his human counterpart, Chakass. There is genuinely no better way to prepare for Halo Infinite than with Audible. So, once again, start your Audible 30-day free trial today by going to audible.com/HiddenXperia, or by texting HiddenXperia to 500 and get a free audiobook and unlimited free Audible original monthly downloads for absolutely nothing, and get your Zeta Halo lore in tip-top shape before Halo Infinite. Thank you to Audible for being the extremely fitting sponsors of today's video, and now, back to Zeta Halo. 43 years then passed, and Installation 07 was considered lost with all hands by the Forerunner Ecumene. In the meantime, Faber, who was no longer on Installation 07, took a separate Halo to the ancient prophet homeworld of Janjaquam, and fired it, an act that was in direct violation of the mantle, and that actually sparked a rebellion within the Foreigners, but one that was quickly suppressed by Faber's personal private builder security forces. However, he was eventually arrested for this egregious act against the mantle, and stood trial for his crimes on the Forerunner capital world of Maithrillion. As it was such a momentous occasion, all 11 Halos were brought into orbit, with Zeta Halo still missing in action. But not for long. As the trial was taking place, all of a sudden Zeta Halo, controlled by Mendicant Bias and the Primordial, appeared over the capital. Mendicant managed to subvert its cause on the other 11 Halos and free Faber. The capital fought back immediately, temporarily stunning Mendicant, but as the capital's defense force began to fight back, Zeta Halo's sentinels and Faber's ships went on the offensive to defend the Halo. A cataclysmic naval conflict raged, with many ships crashing on the surface of the ring, before Mendicant brought the entire thing to a conclusion by firing the Halo, wiping out almost all life at the capital and in the capital star system. In the wake of this utter massacre, Zeta Halo's safety protocols kicked in, which were designed to stop it from falling into the wrong hands, and retreated it through a portal to the edge of the galaxy, where it was then set on a course to collide with a planet in a matter of days. And with its automated control systems destroyed by the capital's defences, Mendicant and the Primordial had a bit of a problem on their hands. As the ring underwent repair procedures, despite the fact that most of its power stations were out of action, Mendicant used its power to corrupt the combat suits and the AIs of the foreigners who survived their shipwrecks on the ring, forcing them to remove their armor and making them far more susceptible to the parasite that was rapidly consuming the surface. At one of the Palaces of Pain, the Primordial could be seen soaring through a canyon atop a strange spinning disc, flying above thousands of humans being herded into the palace by foreigner war sphinxes. However, the AI and the captive's intentions with the humans weren't actually what you might expect. You see, Zeta Halo was completely out of their control and locked into a collision course, and so some bargaining was in order. The two removed the ancestral personality imprints from any humans who had them to prevent their ancestors from tainting their decision-making, and then they proposed an offer: cooperate with them and have their revenge against the foreigners who 10,000 years prior had wiped out their ancestors, and in doing so, they will also help them avert Installation 07's destruction. Those who chose to work with this precursor AI dynamic duo were sent to various installations across the Halo that would help control it as it hurtled through space, including, but not limited to, its cartographer, and were connected with flood-infected foreigners who had been composed, which would allow them to interface with the installation's controls. From what I can gather, because these humans weren't technically reclaimers yet, they weren't able to connect or interface with foreigner control systems, and so required some sort of foreigner input to allow them to do so. Ultimately, they managed to position the Halo such that the planet it was set to collide with passed directly through the middle, which, yes, averted its destruction, but at the same time, it completely screwed with its gravitational systems, like so badly that it started to almost crumple. Its outer walls started coming apart and foundational plates began bending and distorting, leaving 100+ kilometer gaps in its surface. Despite Zeta Halo's systems, both internal and external, being in utter disarray, Mendicant and the Primordial had managed to ensure the Halo's overall survival. However, this victory would be very, very short-lived. As it was passing round the planet, the fleet sent by the Ecumene to hunt down Zeta Halo, Mendicant Bias, and the Captive, led by the Isodidact, arrived. Now, okay, before we continue, let me just do a brief explainer of the Isodidact for those who don't know what I'm talking about. So, the Didact we fought in Halo 4 was the Didact. The Isodidact was once a simple foreigner known as Bornstellar, who prior to most of the events in this video, awoke the Didact from his cryptum on Earth. The Didact then proceeded to imprint his personality onto Bornstellar, essentially making him a carbon copy of the Didact, the Isodidact, harbouring his consciousness, his memories, his thoughts and his feelings, as well as his own, and also even being able to control him as well. So once again, the Didact was the Didact in Halo 4, the Isodidact was not. But yeah, getting back onto topic, this fleet, consisting of several foreigner warships and also dreadnoughts, had the Halo surrounded. The dreadnoughts descended to the surface, connecting to its plates to provide it with power, while the Isodidact deactivated Mendicant Bias and made his way to the cartographer. Now in total control of the once lost Halo, he realised it was far too damaged to be saved, at least in its entirety in its current state, and so it underwent a radical change. Most of its damaged sections, along with some of its undamaged sections as well, were shed into space, and overall, Zeta Halo shed 2/3 of its size, bringing it down to 10,000 kilometers in diameter, thus giving it parity with the other 6 Halos in the Neoteric Array. With Zeta Halo now in its final state, there were other matters that needed tending to. Surviving humans on the Halo were relocated by life workers to the Lesser Ark. Mendicant Bias was captured, forced to undergo de-rampancy procedures and disassembled, with its parts scattered among various worlds for study. Its core, however, remained on Zeta Halo. Remember that. And the Primordial was imprisoned in a reverse stasis chamber, hundreds of meters beneath the surface of the Halo. The Isodidact and Chakas, the human that would later become 343 Guilty Spark, descended into the dark metal cavern to interrogate it. Within the Isodidact, the Erdidact let out a chant, something of a Forerunner prayer, and then they began speaking with the captive. It revealed to them the true nature of the Flood, that they were synonymous with the Precursors, and that their goal was one of unity, not plague, and that it was long ago decided that the role of the Mantle of Responsibility would never fall to the Forerunners. It repeated what it told Mendicant, that humans would bear the mantle, that they would rise again in arrogance and defiance, and the Flood would return when they are ripe and bring them unity. It reconfirmed that there was never such a thing as a cure for the Flood. What the Forerunners thought to be a cure within the humans was actually just the Flood's doing. Judgment, timing. Misery is sweetness. As the chamber began to accelerate time within it, causing millions of centuries to occur within mere seconds, the Primordial, deep beneath Zeta Halo's surface in a cave, lit by a misty blue light with the murmuring of machinery echoing within, uttered its final words. "We are the Flood. There is no difference. Until all space and time are rolled up and life is crushed in the folds, no end to war, grief, or pain. In 101,000 centuries, unity again, and wisdom. Until then, sweetness." Its body then began to break apart as it decomposed, a dusty cloud emanating from its remains, and mere seconds later, the captive was no more. At least, physically. You see, the Primordial transferred its consciousness into the Flood's hive mind, essentially weaving itself into the very fabric of existence using the precursor concept of neural physics, and as such, any gravemind that forms contains its consciousness. For example, Halo 2 and Halo 3's gravemind contain the consciousness of the Primordial, and all yet to be created graveminds will as well, unless, like it said, all space and time are rolled up and life is crushed in the folds. Deep and honestly bloody terrifying, if you ask me. The idea that this ancient, omnipotent creature can never truly be vanquished without tearing apart the very fabric of existence is so unbelievably hardcore I can't even put it into words. However, there was still one big problem. Not only was the Flood still rapidly consuming Forerunner worlds, getting closer and closer to the capital with each passing day, there was also a significant outbreak on Zeta Halo. And so, the ring was shrouded in a thick fog, and anyone left on it, along with all the infected composed Forerunners, the rest of the Flood-infected victims, and also 10 deactivated gravemines, were left on the Halo, to be watched over eternally by the remaining functioning monitors, and it was sent through a portal one last time, never to suffer this fate again. Zeta Halo would become a sacred tomb for the millions who lost their lives either on it or as a consequence of it, both Forerunner and Ancient Human. As it entered the portal, this once lost Halo was finally named Installation 07. And then, in 97,445 BC, the Isodidact activated the Neoteric Halo Array from the Lesser Arc. All 7 Halos, including the now sacred tomb Installation 07, released their pulse, cleansing the galaxy of all life, and essentially resetting it so the modern era of the Halo universe and, in extension, documented human history could begin. After the Neoteric Array was fired, the Halos within it were given their secondary alphabetic names, in order of firing, with Installation 04 being the Alpha, and Installation 07 being the Zeta. Zeta Halo would then remain relatively dormant for some 99,000 years, until the events of Halo 2. When Tartarus began the activation procedures of Delta Halo, the ring sent a signal to all the rings in the array and put them on standby mode, ready to fire on demand. However, later on in Halo 3, they were all deactivated by Chief from the Ark's Citadel. Office of Naval Intelligence researchers later gathered the general topography data of Zeta Halo from the Ark, and some members of this team became fascinated with the ring, referring to it as the most mysterious halo of all. They discovered that still in 2552 it was covered in a perpetual cloud, the fog once placed over it by the isodidact. However, once the researchers actually arrived at Zeta Halo, they discovered the data from the Ark about its surface to be vastly out of date. The fog had actually cleared and its surface had been restored to almost Earth levels of flora and fauna. One of these researchers was Dr. Luther Mann, who, after some groundbreaking research that led to the coordinates of Zeta Halo being discovered, convinced Oni to jumpstart the Zeta Halo project in 2555, in which 300 scientists were sent to the Halo to map it out and research it. However, they discovered a strange Forerunner timer on it that was counting down, 5 weeks till activation, and later similar countdowns were found on the other Halos as well, and so a joint human elite task force was sent back to the Ark to disable it, co-opted by Olympia Vale, Utsei Taham, and Enthos Sarome, which was ultimately successful. Also, sometime following the discovery of the ring, but we have no idea precisely when, a joint human and elite naval force began enacting containment protocols on the existing flood outbreak on the Halo that was left by the isodidact and the Foreigners. So, according to Catalog, which was this really enigmatic Forerunner AI that was once controlled by members of 343's narrative team on Waypoint, not only have they enacted containment measures, but human and allied groups continue monitoring and remediation efforts at Zeta Halo. Now again, we have no idea when this took place, or if these remediation efforts were even fully successful, we just know that at some point they happened. Now, in Hunters in the Dark, which is set in 2555, there was no mention of flood on Zeta Halo, but the human researchers on the ring did only manage to investigate like a very small part of the Halo's surface before having to evacuate because it became a ticking time bomb. And we know for a fact that not all of the Halo was under flood control, so it's possible that they just missed them. There's always a chance. And finally, the last thing we know about Zeta Halo is that in 2560, there was a great war there between the UNSC and the Banished, and that the Banished, led by brute war chieftain Escharum, annihilated the human fleet, leaving survivors stranded either in space or on the Halo. And that is the entire, fully detailed history of Zeta Halo. The setting of Halo Infinite. You can probably hear the smile on my face. I still can't say that sentence without smiling. Now, even if you're like super reserved and you aren't hyped for Halo Infinite, or maybe you're still skeptical about the game, surely you can't sit there and tell me that a game set on this ring isn't like the hypest thing ever, at least in terms of narrative. I honestly still can't put into words my excitement that we're finally getting a game set on this location, one that only themselves quite literally call the most mysterious of all the Halos. And furthermore, not only are we getting a game set on it, the game that we're getting is an open world game that rewards exploration of the ring. I mean, dude, I honestly still can't formulate sentences properly that would even slightly do the potential that this setting has justice. I mean, it's my favorite location in the entire Halo universe, easily my favorite Halo ring, my 3 favorite Halo books, and in fact my 3 favorite books of all time are set primarily on it, and my favorite pieces of Halo lore, like Precursor stuff, Flood stuff, Forerunner stuff, Ancient Human stuff, all stem from it. It's perfect. It honestly is. It's the perfect setting. I mean, I've been asking since 2015 for a game to be set on Zeta Halo, and I've also been predicting since 2015 that the mythical Halo 6 might be set on it. And honestly, I couldn't be happier that it's finally happening. I really couldn't. Anyways, I've got to stop rambling. I could ramble incoherently about this for days on end. I just love this Halo so much. So much. I mean, as if that wasn't already so goddamn apparent, but it's almost 1 AM and I need to go to bed, so I'm going to end the video here. I want to give a massive thank you to all of my patrons for the continued support over there, and thank you all so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.